The things that I wanted to talk about today in a more focused setting, the end of difficult fighting game bosses. And I think this might be an ongoing trend that will continue, but considering the way that Omega Rugal, one of the craziest bosses in fighting game history, and that SNK would show up and essentially say, hey, you love crazy SNK bosses? We got your back. Here's the CPU from hell. Everybody jumps and cheers. There's a celebration down the street. There's a parade. There's confetti. I'm still cleaning up to this day from the announcement celebration that people were going to get absolutely hammered and destroyed by an AI that will slobber knock you from left and right for hours on end until you eventually get lucky and beat it. People were still celebrating, and I'm still sweeping up all the confetti from it. So Omega Rugal comes out, and even on the hardest difficulty setting, he's kind of easy. Even with I've barely played any KOF over the past few weeks due to Elden Ring. I jump in, and I'm like relearning how to do moves, and I'm even like, he's dying really fast. This can't be right. And I just want to see him do some moves. There's very, very few fighting game examples over the past few years where their bosses have been genuinely like crazy. But there is a couple. Here's the thought that I'm proposing. I don't know with big fighting game developers, even ones that have a history of doing difficult fighting game bosses in the past, will willingly spend time to make an AI torture people, especially in like a fighting game that has a big audience, right? In KOF, you might not think that KOF has a big audience, but it definitely does. Like KOF has always had a relatively large worldwide appeal to it. And for them to not give Omega Rugal the sauce is really crazy. And I'm trying to think from modern game design, right? I'm trying to think from a perspective of even if you crank this thing on the hardest difficulty, I don't know if devs want to really make people deal with that shit anymore. Why would Omega Rugal not be absolutely nuts? Why would Sephiroth come out in Smash Brothers as like a crazy boss fight and you can play him early, but it is easy? Like, it's not hard at all. I get it. It's not fun to play against. The input reading aspect of it is a big point. But a few people have already said exactly the conclusion that I came to. Why did that exist in the first place? Why did extremely difficult endgame bosses, if not ridiculous fighting game AI that we have seen in direct examples from other people's channels, actually cheat? Street Fighter 2, Mortal Kombat 2, a lot of these classic fighting games we love actually cheat when it comes to the mechanics of the game. They will break the game in order to make sure that they're the victor. And everybody's saying it.
We've got to have money.
It's about the money. It's always about the money. Arcades needed to eat your coins. Those arcade machines weren't designed to be fair, right? And there were ways to break the AI in those old games. There were obviously AI exploits. But if you were unaware of what the AI exploits were, oh my god, dude. Those SNK bosses and those crazy-ass final bosses of old-school fighting games like what was the guy's name? The Kaiser? Oh, jeez, the ridiculous-ass, insane SNK boss dude that we fought a long time ago. The General. Yeah, the General. Those things essentially existed to get the money out of your pocket. And the game would literally cheat to do it. By that same definition, does a modern-day fighting game really need to introduce an absolutely insane boss that's gonna read your inputs and make you want to throw your controller across the room and like break the game to an extent? Will a modern day, like in the past like 5 to 6 years boss do that? There's very few examples I can even come across that have done it, you know, that even try to do it. And it's really unfortunate that Omega Rugal wasn't one of them, because I feel like this is the one everybody would have been okay with. Like, if you crank the difficulty all the way, I think people want this shit to be super hard. I think people would be okay with it being super hard. And I got a lot of history with this. I literally have made nearly a 10-year series specifically showing how absolutely insane the AI is on some of these classic fighting games. how it's like ridiculously hard. Some people are saying Shadow Jago and stuff like that. Chat, Shadow Jago was almost 10 years ago. I hate to break it to you, but Shadow Jago is at this point a classic fighting game boss. The last one that I personally remember that was truly difficult, right? And got figured out. People definitely figured out. They wanted this stuff to be tough. Was Tekken 7. Shin Akuma, Tekken 7, all the last boss fights of Tekken 7 were genuinely crazy. And yeah, there is definitely things you can do to mitigate those situations and to make them more difficult, but to have completely like original characters doing new crazy things that they have designed is really cool. Shadow Chun-Li. I actually personally loved that Shadow Chun-Li fight in Street Fighter V. I thought that shit was awesome. It wasn't crazy hard though. I don't remember it taking, even at the time I had not played a lot of SF5 in a while, and I don't remember it being that difficult. It wasn't that crazy. The one that I'd say technically counts is, and everyone's mentioning it, the Nago Ryuki fight in Guilty Gear Strive, how you can essentially get this really difficult version of Nago to show up in a specific sort of way. And I wish it was like a unique fight. Like, I feel like the one thing that sort of, for some reason in my stupid brain, the one thing that sort of diminishes the impact of that fight is just that it's a super beefy version of Nago, right? It just is a hyper AI version of an existing Nago Ryuki. Correct me if I'm wrong, chat, because I don't think I've ever actually seen it. Does he look any different? Does he have like an aura or something? Does he have like a different costume or clothes or anything? He looks the exact same, but he just goes in crazy hard, right? I wish they did something more with that. It feels like they could have made that shit super sick. They could have made that a really sick boss fight. That's what I'm trying to say. Because Guilty Gear Strive still technically does not have a final boss, right? He is essentially like the same guy, just jacked on AI juice, which is cool. That is really cool. I think I miss like big final boss celebrations. And to me, this even goes back all the way back to even games like Marvel vs. Capcom 2, where it's like, oh man, these boss fights get easier and easier and easier. They are essentially missing a lot of the really fun stuff that some of the more difficult versions had. All I'm trying to say is that if developers are going to put a bunch of time into actually a unique character that is a proper boss fight, much less have a history of doing it, it feels like the crazy fighting game pastime that is absolutely batshit insane final bosses, even if they're set to the hardest difficulty, is kind of gone. And to me, Omega Rugal being the way he was is so heartbreaking. It's so damn heartbreaking. It makes me want to go back and get fucked up by all the previous versions of Rugal, which we're eventually going to have to do. I think that there is answers to this. Good riddance. I understand people are like, put another nail in that coffin. That shit is done. Here's the caveat, I'd say. Here's where I think that there is a huge expanse of fighting game future where developers can utilize crazy hard AI and give not just the player, but potentially players more chances to have fun with hard stuff. And yes, one game already does it. Functionally very weird because of the netcode, but Dragon Ball FighterZ has some of this stuff. They're not really unique. They're just really difficult boss fights. In fact, Mortal Kombat 11 even has some of these like raid bosses and stuff like that. I think raid bosses and teaming up with your friends against fighting game bosses should be a cherished pastime. I think the dramatic battle element of you and a friend teaming up against some ridiculous, crazy-ass AI boss should be a thing that is like celebrated and cherished, and every fighting game should try to do something like that. Because if there's one thing that fighting games are missing, if we're not going to have the crazy solo boss fights that we kind of had before, it would be nice to at least have that moment with a friend and develop strategies with a friend. In fact, I wish that KOF 15, you know what, KOF 15, if you want to fix this situation, you should juice up Omega Rugal. Juice him up, make him nuts, make him recover a ridiculous amount of health, make him do all this nutty shit. But you know what you should, you know what I hope they do, if they don't do anything for the single player one? Turn it into a raid mode boss. Turn it into that mode that's in the game, the party mode where everybody controls a character, Do that with Omega Rugal and allow people to play online with each other on that kind of a fight. If devs really want to get away from the fighting game bosses cheesing you out until you find a way to cheese them, which can either be a very frustrating or rewarding process depending on the person. If there's a situation that works that I think would be great for everybody involved, is allowing fighting games for you to team up with your friends instead of just beat up your friends. If there's a future for big, crazy fighting game bosses, I hope that's the direction they go.